Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of Wicked Tongue by C.L. Schneider, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Join me. Chapter 1. The weight of one too many bad decisions pressed down on Daniel's skull, pushing and grinding into his forehead like a vice. The imaginary clamps closed and tightened with each breath as he struggled, for at least the third time, to open his eyes and lift his head. Neither happened, and the vice clamped tighter. Any more and it might crack, he thought, finding a morsel of dark humor in his predicament, as Daniel envisioned his brain running like an egg from its busted shell. The morbid image took root, and the amusement turned to unease. It wormed in deeper as the pressure built, the notion of tiny fissures forming suddenly seeming all too real, too possible. The nightmare scenario was his first cohesive thought since waking. Others had surfaced but scattered before they formed, his synapses as lethargic as the rest of him. It was a clear disconnect, made more disturbing by Daniel's inability to remember how he got home or when. He couldn't recall the last time he drank enough to black out. I must have pounded them down after we left the restaurant. Flashes and snippets of his night out with friends raced through his mind. He tried to put them in order. Dinner, the club, and then the diner? Vaguely, he remembered moments from each destination, including his first stop of the night, the pizza place across from his apartment. He couldn't arrive at the restaurant hungry. The state of his bank account made the entree prices too rich for his blood. He remembered music pumping when the six of them stepped inside the club, lights flashing and bodies gyrating to the beat. It was hot, packed inside. His best friend Caleb bought the first round. Must have been a double, one of many, apparently. Nothing else made sense. But why last night? It was a normal Saturday after a normal week. No one had a birthday or a promotion to celebrate, no breakups or sorrows to drown. He couldn't remember deciding it was a good night to get blackout drunk, unless something happened, something he couldn't remember. Not that Daniel needed a reason. His penchant for poor choices kicked off back in middle school when he decided sneaking out to roam the dark streets of his hometown was not only safe and logical, it was infinitely more educational than homework. Where else could a naive wannabe actor learn about lives different from his own? As a teen, he moved on from observing what passed for nightlife in his hometown to participating and became intimately familiar with hangovers. He hadn't been plagued by them in years, though. Not like this. Not since sophomore year in college. Poof. That practice made Proof that practice made perfect, he thought, his second attempt at humor. It went over about as well as the first. The sentiment rang true, though. Daniel's system had long gotten used to the routine of late nights and early mornings. There was nothing for him to get up and work out while his friends lounged in bed cursing their own existence. Except, for some reason, today was different. Wrong. But why? Groaning, Daniel pushed the heels of his hands into his temples. Why didn't it feel like a hangover? Why was each swallow like pushing down broken glass? Dehydration, he decided. It had leached the moisture from his throat, more than usual, but still on point, as was his throbbing headache. Despite what he assumed was the queasiness of countless tequila shots topped with a plate of loaded nachos at 2 a.m. sloshing in his stomach, he was starving. Again, dehydration, his body confusing a lack of water with hunger. It was a simple explanation, yet it didn't sit well with Daniel. Mostly because he wasn't just a little hungry, or even a lot. He was famished, ravenous to the point of nausea, well beyond anything he had experienced before. Weakness trembled his insides, gnawing and burrowing deeper into the empty pit of his stomach with each breath. And a lack of water didn't explain the rest. A high-pitched ringing filled his ears like the time he went with his cousin to the shooting range and took his headphones off at the wrong time. His entire face hurt, particularly his mouth, filling it with the taste of something rank and far too much saliva. The liquid built faster than he could get rid of it as he choked and sputtered, trying to swallow the excess spit. What little went down hurt like hell as it passed over his irritated throat. The passage seemed narrower than it should, inflamed or clogged, and his tongue kept getting in the way. It felt odd in his mouth, thick and swollen. Daniel winced as moving the organ brought a stab of pain. What the hell? He forced his weary body to move, Then, rolling off his back and onto his side, the nightstand sat only a few inches away, but the alarm clock was angled wrong, making it impossible to read through half-closed lids and tousled hair. Too tired to sit up and do anything about it, Daniel decided he didn't care. If he was sick, he belonged in bed. He certainly had no interest in dealing with the dishes in his sink or the dirty clothes in his hamper. Both were overflowing. Rest was the best thing for him. Drool slid from between his lips, wetting the pillow. He tried to ignore it, but the fabric pressed cold and sticky against the side of his face, more than it should. It was already wet. Shit, did I throw up? Disgust overrode lethargy, and Daniel shoved his hair aside, forced his eyes open, and promptly scooted back from the wide ring of blood. Muted bands of daylight leaked in between the bent and uneven slats of the window blinds behind him. The slender yellow beams were enough to prove the red stain wasn't shadow or imagination. Daniel stared, brows denting, as he struggled to comprehend how the discoloration got there, stark against the white of his pillowcase. The center was deep and dark, as if it had been soaking in for hours. The outside rim was tacky, more of an orangey red, lighter as the puddle expanded. Streaks across the length of the pillowcase and sheets deposited as he tossed and turned in his sleep. He lifted the edge of the pillow to peer underneath. Red had soaked clean through to the mattress. How had he lost so much blood and not woken up? Or choked? Did I swallow it all? Is that why my stomach is wrecked? Fresh, bright dots dribbled onto the fabric. Oh, God. Daniel raised a hand. He tried to catch the blood dripping from his mouth, but it leaked out too fast. Another drop, then another, escaped between his fingers, trickling over his chin and onto his bare chest. What the fuck? Fighting with the covers tangled around his feet, he scrambled off the bed in his boxers and ran to the bathroom. The light from his bedroom window barely reached in enough to outline the wreck. On the wall inside the door, he fumbled for a towel. Pulling one free, he held it against his mouth and hurried to the sink. Daniel stood for a moment, heart thumping, afraid to turn on the light. He didn't want to see how bad it was, to know what stupid thing he'd done to himself last night. Rational explanations surfaced. He tried to settle on one. I must have run into a door, or fell, on the sidewalk, or the stairs outside. No, bar fight. Son of a bitch, that must be it. If I lost a tooth, please tell me I didn't bite my tongue. Or pierce it. Shit. There was talk of that at the table last night. Chloe, Caleb's sister, had taken the plunge last year. It looked hot as hell on her with her signature red lipstick, shaggy jet black hair, and tribal tattoos. Felt nice, too, when they hooked up over the summer. She'd hung out for a while at the club, giving him mixed signals, then disappearing with her friends before he could do anything about it. Daniel liked Chloe. Really liked her. Probably more than she liked him. He remembered toying with the idea of going after her, of finding some new way to impress her. It was a quest he'd been on since high school. But a piercing? I wouldn't have done that. I couldn't have. A fight, then. Must have been. One of the guys started some shit and we all got dragged into it. Either way, I'm screwed. Daniel had an audition in 2 days. He couldn't show up, beat all to hell with a fucked up smile. He'd lost the last 3 parts he'd tried out for. This one had to break the streak. His agent was already threatening to can him. Losing out on another acting job meant taking more hours behind the bar at the corner, listening to more drunks spew their tales of woe, squirreling away tips for a plastic surgeon if whatever the hell was wrong with him left a scar. God damn it, I really screwed up this time. Knots formed in his queasy stomach, his mouth throbbed. Feeling stupid and cowardly, standing in the dark bathroom, Daniel flipped on the light. He dropped the towel in the sink and looked in the mirror. Huh. At first glance, he found nothing. No bruises or cuts to indicate a fight, not even a split lip. Red veined across his eyes. Their bloodshot, puffy appearance was much worse than normal, but not entirely out of the ordinary for excess alcohol and lack of sleep. Daniel wasn't a kid anymore. Maybe it was time to admit that and listen to what his body was telling him. And yet, instinct still said it was more. Something else was wrong. A hangover doesn't make your throat swell, he thought, turning his head side to side, noticing the slight bulging on both sides of his neck. He leaned closer to the mirror, parting only his lips, he kept his teeth closed for a thorough check. None were missing, no chips, thank God. Daniel ran a finger over the outside of his back teeth with no surprises. So far, so good. Next, he inspected the inside of his cheeks. He found no cuts, but several small lumps of swelling, like he had bitten the sides of his mouth. While I was sleeping? Or when I fell? If he bit down hard enough, it might explain the blood. Except the tissue was whole with no lacerations. Any wounds able to cause such a large stain on his pillow would still be open and painful. This doesn't make any sense. Saliva gathered rapidly, begging him to swallow, filling his mouth with the same foul taste as before. Why wouldn't it stop? Jesus Christ, I'm slobbering like a rabid dog. Annoyed at his numerous odd ailments, Daniel bent and spat in the sink. As he watched the red stringy globs slide down the drain, irritation turned to uncertainty, to outright fear. The blood had to be coming from somewhere. He looked in the mirror again and opened his mouth. Relief at finding no piercing faded at the sight of his tongue. It was severely swollen and discolored, almost purple. Did I bite it? I must have. When I fell, he decided again. Daniel concentrated, struggling to force the memory of what happened into his mind. He and Caleb shared a cab from the diner. He remembered that much. Streetlights blurred as the car drove across town, wind blowing in the open window. Did the driver hit someone? Maybe I smacked my face on the window. He tried to conjure a blurry flash of something, anything, to confirm the cause. Come on, damn it, think. There was nothing, not even a notion of getting hurt. Daniel moved his tongue side to side, grimacing as pain radiated through his entire mouth and down into his throat. He stared closer, eyes widening as they focused on his dangling uvula, shrunken and shriveled like a raisin. Holy shit, what could cause that? A pang of hunger twisted through his gut. His stomach demanded food, but how was he supposed to eat when swallowing his own spit was a challenge? Blood seeped out from underneath his tongue. Is that the source? Daniel prepared himself for the discomfort and raised it to look underneath, expecting to discover nothing but the cut he'd been looking for. Finding something else entirely, he cried out, jumping back from the sink with a startled, garbled, "What the fuck?" Pulse racing, chest heaving, he stared at his own horrified visage in the mirror, praying for what he saw not to be real. It's a trick of the light, a shadow. That's all it is. Please, God, let that be all it is. Daniel gathered his courage and moved back to the mirror. He tried not to tremble as he leaned in and opened his mouth again. This time he used the towel to grip the tip of his swollen tongue. He lifted it, and air stopped reaching his lungs. It wasn't a shadow. A web of engorged dark veins covered the underside of his tongue, the bottom of his mouth, and the inside of his gums. His salivary glands were enlarged, elongated, and dulled it with pustules. Daniel raised the organ higher and found nothing to restrict the motion. The connective tissue attaching his tongue to the floor of his mouth no longer existed. How? Inflammation bloated the back, distorting the entire area. He couldn't remember exactly how it looked before. He didn't sit around staring at his tongue in the mirror all the time. Yet he had a distinct notion it wasn't attached to his mouth the same way as before. Ridiculous. It's not possible. None of this is possible. I was fine last night, but I'm not now. Daniel gawked at the abomination in his mouth, repulsed and panicked, his thumping heart overriding the ringing in his ears. What the hell is wrong with me? Blood gathered, pulling rapidly. He still couldn't see a cut or any origin. It seemed to just be there, oozing from the tissue. Saliva came with it, filling his mouth again. One thing was clear. This can't be an injury. An accident would leave bruises and lacerations, some evidence of impact or trauma. Daniel let go of his tongue and emptied the slobber into the sink, gripping the porcelain side to stop himself from shaking. Sweat beaded on his skin as he struggled to understand. He couldn't remember when he had last had so much as a cold. He was healthy, fit. Yesterday morning he went to the gym. How could he come down with something that looked like the fucking plague so fast? Ideas spun in his head, each worse than the last. Allergic reaction, virus, some kind of bacterial infection, cancer, an STD? Shit, was I with someone last night? Dino couldn't remember. Either way, it couldn't have happened that fast. Nothing did. Turning from the sink, he tried to recall where he'd left his phone. By the bed? In my jacket? God damn it, he cried, hating how his thick tongue garbled his speech. Where is it? He needed to look up his symptoms, call a doctor. He had to see someone today, now. The ER. I'll go to the ER. The closest hospital was only 5 miles away. It didn't offer the most modern facilities, but it had a fairly good reputation in a new wing. His town had become a bedroom community in recent years, a distinction that brought more traffic, but also trendier restaurants and shops, road improvements, new high-end developments, and new professionals to fill the empty homes. He remembered reading about the hospital expanding its staff. Someone there will know what's wrong with me. It was early Sunday morning. The waiting room would be full of drunks, but they'd take him quickly. They had to. He was bleeding and could barely swallow. They'd order a few tests, tell him what was wrong, give him a prescription. He'd be fine before the audition. Daniel nodded to himself as he focused on the steps ahead, convinced his ordeal would be over soon. On the strength of that belief alone, he felt better. It's not as bad as it looks. It can't be.